Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. This video is meant as an introduction to the team called the New Mutants. The first appearance of the team was published in the Marvel graphic novel aptly named The New Mutants. The original members of the New Mutants were gathered by Professor Charles Xavier and Moira McTaggart. Some of you might already be familiar with these two characters from the Uncanny X-Men series. Professor Xavier lost his students, the X-Men, in battle with the Brood, thinking they were dead and was grieving over their loss. Vowing to no longer gather an army of mutants to try and do good for the world, he was somewhat hesitant to lead and teach his young New Mutants, in fear of them getting hurt or dying while risking their lives and lose another team of young people once again. He eventually changed his mind with the help of Moira and welcomed these new students in his mansion and school. The New Mutants' original lineup consists of Rain Sinclair, Wolfsbane, Roberto da Costa, Sunspot, Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Danielle Moonstar, Mirage, and Sean Koyman, Karma. In the first team-up, they battle a familiar villain from the X-Men line of comics, but before all that, we get introduced to them one by one. Rain Sinclair, Wolfsbane. In the Highlands of Scotland, we see Moira McTaggart being scared in her tracks by a wolf. This wolf crash lands and reverts to a human form, and Moira recognizes her instantly as Rain Sinclair, a local girl whom she helped deliver as a baby. Rain was chased and tried to escape from a mob of religious fanatics, who saw her as a devil's child. Instantly Moira tries to help Rain and then gets confronted by the mob. Threats are being issued, but they happen to be on the Kinross Plains, which is owned by Moira. This allows Moira to get rid of the mob and bring Rain to a safer place. Roberto da Costa, Sunspot. Roberto, a Brazilian living in Rio de Janeiro, is taking part in a soccer match, which is being watched by his dad, Emmanuel da Costa, and his girlfriend Juliana. Since Roberto is such a good soccer player, he gets roughly tackled by members of the opposing team. Having a short fuse, this triggers his mutant ability, and he pushes one of the bullies off of him, hurling him yards away due to his immense strength. And this scares most of the audience members. Meanwhile, we see the whole situation is being watched by a person wearing very distinct clothing. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball. Sam, a US citizen in Kentucky, is about to descend into a coal mine owned by Pierce Consolidated to grind hours of tough labor with his colleagues. He mentions to his boss that he chooses to remain in Kentucky to provide for his mother and siblings, regardless of him having gained a scholarship. His father, who used to work in the coal mines as well, was proud of Sam having earned a scholarship. But Sam now does what he has to do to try and make sure that one of his brothers and sisters will be able to go to college or university. As the shift progresses, the mine starts to cave in. Everyone scrambles, but Sam remains because his boss is trapped. He tries to rescue him, but as the cave-in traps them both, Sam is overcome by an adrenaline boost which triggers his mutant ability, allowing them to escape. All this is also being spied on by the same character as before. Danielle Moonstar, Mirage. We then switch over to Danielle Moonstar, a Native American from Colorado who is meditating, trying to come at peace with herself. Apparently she has been troubled much as of late. She's being approached by a wild cat-like animal and seems to have some kind of friendship with that animal. The cat gets scared away by someone else approaching, who happens to be her grandfather. He tells her that he has invited Charles Xavier over to come and talk and possibly help Danielle with whatever has been troubling her. She pretty much flips out over a white man being invited over, and her anger activates her uncontrolled power of projecting other people's greatest fears. They are both startled by what's happened, and Danielle even more so. She apologizes and says she couldn't help herself, to which her grandfather responds by saying that is specifically why she needs to go see Xavier. Danielle says she doesn't want to, because in her opinion, whites are the enemies of the natives. Her grandfather responds by saying that this is nonsense, since Charles and Danielle's father were best friends, blood brothers, and he even calls Charles family. He also commands Danielle to meet Charles and to obey him, like she would her grandfather or even her father if he had been alive. Danielle reluctantly consents. Of course, this is all being spied on by the same figure, who we now find out is Donald Pierce of the Hellfire Club, who's planning to jump the meeting between Danielle and Professor Xavier. He says so in the company of a woman named Tessa, who is also part of the Hellfire Club as an assistant to Sebastian Shaw, the Black King. Tessa appears to be held captive by Pierce. Apparently Donald Pierce hates mutants, and, as seen in previous stories of the Uncanny X-Men title, the inner circle of the Hellfire Club is slowly being taken over by more and more mutants. A development which totally disgusts Pierce, and he'll try anything to put a stop to this. Next we see Danielle waking up from a nightmare, sensing something is wrong with the grandfather. She jumps on her horse and rushes out to look for him, but when she finds him, it's already too late. She finds him dead, knowing the authorities will probably regard it as a drunken old Indian who wandered on the highway and got himself killed. Danielle is convinced that this is not the case, that this is what the vision of his greatest fear was showing. Danielle suspects her grandfather to have been threatened by those characters in the vision, and that they are the reason why he is now dead. She wishes her grandfather had told her about this, so they both could have faced him together. She swears vengeance. Sean Koima, Karma. Sean Koima was introduced in Marvel Comics at an earlier time, in a story involving her relatives, more specifically her uncle and siblings, as well as Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. At the end of the story, Reed Richards, also known as Mr. Fantastic, suggested to get into contact with Professor X to help Sean out with getting to know her powers better. She eventually does, and being a Vietnamese refugee with no place to call her home, she takes up residence in Xavier's mansion to get to know her mutant abilities better. We catch up with Sean, Professor X, Moira and Rain at the mansion where Moira and Charles are conducting some tests on Sean. Charles says that the tests point out strong psionic readings rivaling his own, and that he would like to see a demonstration of her powers. This is when we learn that Sean is actually scared of using her powers on others, because she becomes aware of her subject's thoughts, feelings and memories, and gradually begins to think and act like them. She mentions that she is actually against having such power, and that she'd rather be normal. But she also thinks that since she has these kind of powers, it's better to learn to control them, rather than be controlled by them instead. At this moment, Moira offers herself up as the guinea pig for Sean to experiment on. Sean takes over Moira's body and mind, and starts speaking in her own voice from Moira's mouth. This of course totally freaks out Rain, and she immediately turns into a half-wolf mode. Charles commands Rain to revert back to human form telepathically, which is a new sensation for Rain, and she does so, asking Xavier how she could hear him without using her ears. Sean sets Moira's body down in a chair and releases her mind. Apparently Moira has no recollection of everything which has just happened. It seems like she momentarily ceased to exist, according to the sensors. The four of them take a break from the examinations and will eat some lunch, during which we learn more about Sean's backstory. And we also learn just how out of place Rain feels, and how her religious views makes her think that their powers have been gotten from Satan. Charles says that that's nonsense, and that they were simply born different, and that Satan has nothing to do with that. This is also when we find out about Charles' reservations of leading a new team of mutants, since he just recently lost his previous team, the X-Men. Moira, knowing Charles really well and also his doubts, convinces Charles during a telepathic conversation between the two, without the two teenagers being aware of what's going on, nor are they aware of the X-Men losing their lives for that matter. Moira mentions that the X-Men losing their lives is not more important than realizing the dream Charles had, nor is it more important than trying to help out these two young girls who are in need of a teacher. She also mentions that Charles and her are old lovers. Apparently Moira pushed all the right buttons, and Charles agrees to help the girls out. Next the doorbell rings, and Moira goes to see who's there. While she's gone, we see Rain having an internal monologue about how to treat Moira, since Moira seems to treat Rain as an equal, rather than simply being an orphan. Once again we see Rain internally struggling with her current situation. It is also very weird to her. Sean mentions her worries about her little brother and sister, and how she will not be able to have a job, care for her siblings and be at the school. Xavier then offers her a job at the school so she doesn't have to take up a separate job. At this moment Moira returns and she brings a letter which has just arrived. It's Danielle's grandfather's invitation letter. Charles reads it, and apparently the possible third mutant joining the school has just presented herself. and thus Charles suggests a road trip to Colorado. One day after Professor Xavier suggested to go on a trip to Colorado, Rain, Sean and him arrive. They find Black Eagle, Danielle's grandfather, dead, lying on some form of grave. Xavier is stricken with grief and explains to girls what Black Eagle meant to him and his tribe. They wonder how they will be able to find Danielle now. Suddenly, the highlands of Colorado change into those of Vietnam, with military helicopters and soldiers invading their space. Sean is terribly disturbed by this, being thrown back into the nightmare that she's been living in from birth. Xavier tries to calm her down, being aware of this being a psychic attack, when there's suddenly an explosion. A real one. At that moment, Danielle, who was close by, is being attacked by armored men on flying machines. She recognized them as the same persons she saw in her grandfather's biggest fear. She tries to run away and use her powers on them, but she's not able to pierce through the helmet's psychic defenses. The mountain lion whom Danielle befriended attacks one of the men, trying to protect her from an attack, but he gets easily disposed of. Danielle is worried about the animal, and the man tells her she'll join the animal soon enough while he grabs her. Luckily, Sean is able to take over one of the men's bodies and uses her power to attack his compatriots with the weapons on the flying machinery. She tries to calm down Danielle by saying that she's among friends, and she tells Xavier that she didn't mean to kill the attackers but just stun them. She also tells him that she will take off one of the men's helmets so he can mentally interrogate him. Danielle hears what Sean said and figures she will now be able to use her power on the attacker. She decides to mentally attack him and destroy his mind, to avenge her grandfather and cat, but Xavier tells her to stop. He also tells her how he knows her name, because he was there when her parents named her, and that he's here to help her, just like he promised her father and grandfather. Danielle's skeptical and wants him to leave her alone. But Xavier asks her if this is really what she wants, to live alone in terror of her powers that she doesn't understand. He tries to convince her and to allow him to help her in learning about and controlling her abilities. While she asks why she should trust him, she gets overcome by pain in her shoulder, which had apparently been dislocated in the struggle before. Sean, having lived in a country at war, learned first aid on the fly and is able to put Danielle's arm back into place. Sean then tells Danielle she needs to rest now. But Danielle's native pride takes over and tells Xavier that she wants an explanation and how it was that the killers knew him as well. Xavier has mind-probed them and found out that they're part of a network of assassins devoted to exterminate mutant kind, established by Donald Pierce. And that they have two other targets, namely one boy in Brazil and one in Kentucky. They apparently have no time to waste and they will have to split up to try and reach the boys at the same time. At that moment, Danielle pulls out a war knife and plans to plunge it into the prisoner's heart, since he has served his purpose. Xavier mentally stops Danielle's physical attack and tells her they should just hand over the prisoner to the authorities and let justice be served. Danielle tells him there's only one way of justice, if her grandfather would be restored back to life, and that taking revenge on Pierce is the only way vengeance will be served. And to that end, Danielle will work with them. He can do whatever he wants with these men, but Pierce is hers. The next day, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the hotel where Maura McTaggart is staying with Danielle and Sean is being raided by the police. They have no idea what's going on, and Maura asks the policemen what's going on here. They are being arrested because they tried to get into contact with Emmanuel da Costa regarding his son Roberto. There had been an attempt to abduct the boy and his girlfriend has disappeared. They're being taken to the police station, where they will find out what their part is in all of this. Maura looks at Sean, and Danielle is about to use her powers on the policeman, but before she does, Sean tells her not to do that and let her take over one of the policemen. This results in the handcuffs being placed on Sean and Danny aren't fully locked, and Maura gets escorted out uncuffed. Since they don't know what's waiting for them outside, they will have to wait with trying to escape. Once outside, the policeman that Sean has control over punches the other policeman and the girls escape. Maura tells the girls she'll be alright and that they should run away and try and help out or rescue the Da Costa boy. When the girls are far away enough, Sean releases control over the policeman. When the sun is set, the girls have found Roberto, thanks to the modified cerebral mutant detection devices on the wrist, which they got from Maura. He's trying to run away from home. The girls wonder what he's up to, and since they have no idea, they decide to follow him. They end up in the slums of Rio, where Roberto says that he did what was asked of him, and tells the captors of Juliana to release her, as promised. He gets slammed against the wall while being made fun of and is told by the captors that they will do whatever they please, to him and to her. He promises his girlfriend in Portuguese he will get her home safely, and she asks him what they can do, being only 14 years old and their captors being monsters. Roberto tells her that so is he. He asks the men what their ransom will be in English, but they tell him, while holding them both at gunpoint, that Roberto misunderstands, because they're not doing this for money. They're doing this for blood, his blood. Roberto tells Juliana to get behind him as he powers up and starts attacking the men. Normally he would have been successful against normal men in armor, but these guys are no longer normal human beings. They had once been attacked by Wolverine, as simple Hellfire Club foot soldiers. Having been cut to shreds and nearly dead, they have been saved and upgraded with bionics, thanks to Donald Pierce. They are now faster, more agile, tougher and stronger than normal human beings, and they hate mutants. They shoot at Roberto, but he throws a crate at them. Roberto then tries to pick up a huge piece of concrete, but it suddenly feels heavy and he can't pick it up. He gets dizzy, as his strength is gone. His battery is drained. One of the soldiers holds Roberto at point-blank gunpoint, as he asks them to let Juliana go, regardless of what they will do to him. The soldier says that he would say yes, considering this is his last request, but that he would be lying if he said that. Suddenly that soldier gets taken over by Sean, and she whispers to Roberto to not be afraid since the rescuers are on the way, and for him to grab Juliana and run for the entrance while she distracts the other Hellfire Club soldiers. With Sean having experience with taking over regular humans, she has some troubles controlling these soldiers with their bionic enhancements. Danielle lends a hand by pulling their greatest fears out of their minds. It is of course no surprise that this is Wolverine, the one mutant who cut them all up and left them for dead. As they're all distracted and stricken with fear, the girls attack them, but Danielle accidentally attacks the host body that Sean was controlling. Sean tries to help Roberto and Juliana, but Roberto mistakes Sean as one of the captors and punches her. This causes Sean to lose her concentration and control over the host body. This soldier tries to sort out what's happening and figures out they're trying to escape. He grabs a gun and starts shooting. Roberto's powers are fading away again and he gets dizzy once more as Sean is being hit by the gunfire. Roberto, being disoriented, is being noticed by Juliana, and she tries to save him by jumping towards him and put him on the ground. The soldier keeps firing away and Danielle focuses her full power on him, scaring him with a lively, realistic image of what he fears the most. A lively image of Wolverine attacking him once again. He shudders in fear, screams out, and ends up on the floor whimpering like a scared little kid. Danielle says that this was the most intense image she has ever pulled from a person. When she uses her powers, she links with their thoughts and emotions, and this was a very intense experience. Roberto screams out that he deserved no less, because he is the one that killed Juliana. Her body is lying on top of him, and he blames himself for her death, because she was being kidnapped to get a hold of him, and she died shielding him because they were trying to kill him for being born a mutant, a freak. Sean tells Roberto that there's a man in America, a teacher who can help him properly utilize his powers, so what happened tonight does never have to occur again. Roberto says he doesn't care for teachers, he just wants the one responsible, he who sent these men after him, and make him pay. Danielle says they want him too, and suggests they join forces. We then switch over to what's going on with Professor Xavier and Rain, who have traveled to Kentucky. Xavier has had a conversation with Maura on the phone, and she told him all that had happened in Brazil, including what happened to Juliana. He wonders if things would have gone differently if he had gone himself, or acted more quickly. He keeps forgetting these are only children, and no way near X-Men. Their jeep gets hit from the side by what looks to be a missile, but actually is a boy. The jeep catches on fire and gets thrown on its side. Professor Xavier telepathically tells Rain to get away before they hit the ground. As she changes into her wolf form, she runs into the hills and her dark fur camouflages her in the darkness. She realizes that Professor X will not be able to follow her, being paralyzed from the hips down. So she returns to try and save him. She finds out that the boy that hit them is already pulling the unconscious Xavier out of the burning wreckage. She considers attacking him and ripping his throat out, but she doesn't know how to. A helicopter then arrives with men jumping out, wearing the same uniforms as the boy. They call him Cannonball and tell him to load Xavier aboard the helicopter. Sam tells the other soldiers that he's pretty sure he saw a girl in the jeep as well, and tells them he wants to look around for her. They tell him not to, because they have their orders and the scanners aboard the helicopter do not register any other human life forms. Sam then asks who this guy is and why he was ordered to attack him. He asks what Donald Pierce wants with him, and he gets told it's none of his business. He gets paid well to just do his job. Just take your orders and do as you're told. The chopper leaves with Xavier on board, leaving Rain behind, all alone, lost, frightened and homesick. She howls at the sky, but there's no one to hear her cries. With her nose aimed in the air, she picks up a familiar scent. It's Xavier's, and she decides to follow it, however faint it is. Rain has been following the trail of Xavier's scent for miles. It took her hours to get to the facility where the professor is being held. She checks out the surroundings and plans to enter, using her mutant abilities. She switches between her human and wolf form to jump the fence and scare the guard dogs. She's maximizing the abilities of both forms, and even her in-between form of half girl, half wolf. She makes it to the roof of the building. As she looks down through one of the windows, she wonders what her reverend would say about her. She's being insecure about her rights to call herself a human being, thanks to her religious indoctrination. She eavesdrops on Donald Pierce and his goons. Donald Pierce tells Xavier that he's been hooked up to a device, designed by Pierce himself. He calls it a mind tap. It inhibits Xavier to use his psi powers, and, more importantly to Pierce, it absorbs all the information Charles has stored in his brain. He tells Xavier he can try and resist all he likes with his psychic defenses, but in the end, the result will be the same. He actually taunts Xavier to fight as hard as he can, because that will cause damage to Xavier and will eventually melt his brain. Permanently. He also tells Tessa that after he's done with Xavier, it will be her turn. Rain thinks about what she can do to help the professor. Barging in will probably not help either one of them, since she's outnumbered. At that moment, she receives a psychic communication. It is Danielle. Mora told her to try and make contact with Rain. Danielle's ability to bond with animals in a way beyond the ability of normal human beings allows her to communicate with Rain in her transitional form. While this is going on, Cannonball tries to capture Rain. Having seen the intruder from a distance, does not prepare Sam for what he sees up close. He loses his concentration at the sight of Rain's transitional form and crash lands nearby. Sam can't believe his eyes as he now sees Rain in her full wolf form. He wonders if his protective shield, which automatically activates when he's using his flying powers, will protect him from Rain's teeth as well. They won't find out because Danielle uses her powers on Sam and he thinks he's being buried again by the rubble from the cave-in. He thinks he's in the mines again. He then panics and blasts his way straight through the building. The Hellfire Club soldiers are alarmed and come rushing out, fully armed. Rain attacks and bites one of them, while Roberta smashes the wall of the building. This causes some kind of explosion which takes out most of the foot soldiers. Roberta regrets the guards having been protected by their armor. He wishes they had died in the explosion. Sean tells him they are not killers, and Dani tells Sean to speak for herself. Roberta and Danielle have both lost loved ones at the hands of the Hellfire Club soldiers. Danielle will play by the rules for now, until she gets her hands on Pierce. She tells Rain to lead them to Xavier. Cannonball flies towards them and tells them that if they want Pierce, they will have to go through him first. Roberta jumps out of the way and Sam crash lands once again. Sean figures Sam must be a mutant as well, having powers like that, which makes no sense to her because she's aware of Pierce despising mutants. She notices a clear difference between the clumsiness of Sam and the soldiers, who are obviously well-trained killers. As she tries to take over his body, she's unable to. Too scared and too excited. No focus, not enough concentration. Instead she picks up a machine gun one of the soldiers dropped on the floor and starts shooting. All this while thanking her father for teaching her how to use a weapon. She tells Donnie, Roberto and Rain to go inside and find Xavier, and tells Roberto to smash any and all machines he can find. As Roberto does, he thinks back to how, when he was being bullied and a smaller kid, he would get angry and wish for the power to tear things apart. Ironically, he now has this kind of power, but he would give it all up if that would bring him back his now dead girlfriend Juliana. Pierce finds out that these kids Xavier gathered are more formidable than he expected, and he is about to snap Xavier's neck. Rain crashes through a nearby window and attacks Pierce, bites his arm, and I hope she won't start feeling sick from the taste of blood in her mouth. But she won't have to be afraid of that, because instead of flesh and blood, she finds cables, gears and electronics beneath his clothes. Pierce is a cyborg as well. Pierce kicks her off him and Rain changes forms mid-air, trying to maneuver herself so that she won't smash into things too hard. She's partially successful, but still hurt from the impact. Danielle then attacks Pierce, but quickly finds out that apart from his bionic limbs, he also has defenses implanted against all forms of psionic assaults, which includes her mutant gift. Her power gets turned back on herself and she loses her grip and falls down on the floor. Xavier looks at Rain, who's trying to get up, but sees blood on her face. He figures she must have gotten a punctured lung from the impact. He's surprised that she's even still conscious and trying to get up. Regardless of that, he asks her to do something for him, namely move herself to a certain console behind him. At that moment, Roberto smashes into the room and distracts Pierce. He tells the murderer to face his wrath. This allows Rain to do what Xavier asked of her. Cannonball followed Roberto inside and pushed him into a machine with force. Sam himself smashes into the machines as well. He clearly overcalculated Roberto's resistance. Roberto tells Sam it serves him right, attacking him cowardly from behind. Rain struggles to do what Xavier asked her to do and tells him she doesn't have the strength. He then tells her to throw a switch, knowing damn well he's pushing her and could possibly be killing her in the process. Sean enters the room and sees she's the only one fit to fight. She tries to take over Pierce, but runs into the same mechanical psychic disruptors as Danielle did. He simply disposes of Sean and tells Sam to get rid of them after he's done with Roberto. Sam asks Pierce what to do with them. Remove them from the property, hand them over to the sheriff? Pierce answers by telling Sam that he wants them all killed. Sam refuses and Pierce draws a gun on him. Sam tries to start up his mutant ability, but it fails on him. He's too tired from having been using it too much and fighting with Roberto. Pierce then points a gun at Sam and is about to shoot him in the face, but finds that he can't pull the trigger. He figures out it's due to Xavier. Rain was successful in liberating Xavier and he mentally attacks Pierce. On the outside, their battle is visible on their faces. After several seconds, Xavier wins the mental battle. Sam asks what has happened and Xavier tells him that he's a telepath. And he uses powers in a way that he rarely does, by taking total control of Pierce's consciousness. He then makes Pierce release Tessa from her trap. Danielle takes a look at Rain and says she's doing bad and needs to be taken to a hospital. Professor Xavier monitors Rain's condition and hails Mora mentally to come pick them up, so Rain can get rushed into a hospital. Xavier isn't sure what to do with Pierce though. They don't want to wait on the authorities to arrive because Rain's health is of more concern. Yet taking Pierce with him is a risk Xavier is not willing to take. If he happens to break free from Sean's possession, he will slay them all instantly. Tessa provides a solution. She will have the Hellfire Club take care of him, knowing he's as much of a threat to the members of the Inner Circle as to any other mutant. Sam asks what he should do. Roberto tells him to follow his boss and get lost. Sam is left behind by himself as they make their way outside and leave. About 2 weeks later, Xavier is sitting in his study, looking at pictures of 2 teams of X-Men. Reminiscing right before he mentally calls his new students. We see the kids in their rooms, getting dressed in their new uniforms, thinking about what had happened to them and what their place is in all of this, where to go from here. Rain seems to have healed quite fast considering her injuries. Xavier figures it's because of her shape-changing abilities. Xavier and Danielle have a discussion about why she's wearing a different belt and not the one that's supposed to go with the uniform. Xavier then tells Rain to go and open the door even before the doorbell rings. It's Sam. Xavier invited him to come over and was expecting him. Rain's surprised by their former adversary being at the door. Xavier tells her telepathically that anyone can make a mistake. The professor then tells the kids how he invited Sam over and that Donald Pierce tricked Sam in believing they were his enemy. Roberto's skeptical and Sam tries to swallow his pride and tells him he would like to make amends. Rain tells Roberto that he deserves a second chance, and Roberto, being the flirty guy he is, says he cannot resist a beautiful girl like her. Danielle makes fun of Roberto welcoming Sam and asks him who he thinks runs this place. Roberto responds by saying Xavier does, for now. All the kids laugh and even Xavier has a smile on his face. After weeks of grieving and feeling alone and depressed, he starts to cheer up a little bit, thanks to these teenagers. He's not relieved of the pain of loss and feelings of guilt, and he knows those feelings will probably remain a part of him for the rest of his life. But it no longer consumes him. These kids reignite a flame inside of him, and he realizes the dream is still good. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to help me out with growing this channel, you can hit the like button or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so YouTube knows you're enjoying the content. See you next episode.